it's first of all important to remember that preaching is not simply a Bible study. There is an heraldic element, a declarative element, a thus says the Lord element. And this heraldic element carries with it a certain kind of authority, a certain kind of sway. There's a message, there's a burden to it. Then in addition, you want the text as expounded, as proclaimed, to be more than an explanation. It has to be an explanation. You have to reflect what the text says. But it is through the whole personality. It is God's truth worked through the personality of the preacher. The preacher is not simply a tape recorder with some applications nicely worked into the digital system somewhere. It's the truth that is working out through the personality of the preacher, and that carries its own emotional weight. So, in other words, you don't want to think of the emotional power and impetus coming from manipulation or saying things in such a way that people are jacked up. You want the emotions to come out of the truth of the passage, but at the same time, there is an authenticity and integrity in the preacher who has let the text work through him. And so as a result, it carries a weight that otherwise would be lost.
I think I'm trying to ask, what does this do to my desires when I come to a text? So not just how does it inform my mind, though that's obviously really important, but how does it inform my mind to move my desires? So what is the effect that this text should be having on me? Is it to make me mourn for my sin? Is it to make me rejoice in my salvation? Is it to give me hope in the midst of suffering? So how is it working on my desires? What's it doing to my heart?
I think you have to start by trying to feel the particular emotional force of the passage that you're preaching. So I think it's key to allow the passage to speak for itself, so that rather than investing in emotion that doesn't come from the passage, I think the task is to try to convey the emotion of the passage and its rhetorical force to the congregation. I think after you've understood the passage, you need to understand what its primary applications are, and then to think about how you can bring those home, not just to people's understandings, but to motivate them to want to obey and respond in the appropriate way. That can be helped by appropriate illustrations, examples, testimonies, stories, and I always think it's helpful to share something of how the passage has impacted on your own personal life. As preachers, we ought first of all to be preaching the passage to ourselves. So as we stand before our congregations, we ought to be able to say something of how we felt the emotional force of this passage and how we've responded to it. And we're helping them to be able to do the same.
It's like I own the song of the writer. Their song becomes my song. The emotions are similar. Things I grapple with, things we grapple with, and it's easy to relate and it's easy to meet the Christ.
The big thing that I'm trying to do in preaching is to preach Christ from the text to the heart. And I think a big part of that is preaching Christ. I think when you preach Christ to people, you automatically go to the heart because he is so wonderful and so brilliant that actually you want to meet him. I'm looking for the affections in the text itself. So don't just preach the logos of the passage, that is the logic of it. Preach the pathos as well, the feeling of it. What is there in this passage that I should be excited about, afraid about, sorrowful about? What are the affections either in this text or that this text engenders? And then use those to preach to people's hearts.
I think it's really helpful as you're looking at a text to ask yourself, what is it saying, and what is it doing? How does this text look to change us? How are we meant to feel in response to this text? Is this a text that is rebuking us? Is it a text that's encouraging us? Is it a text that's challenging us? Is it giving us a promise to hold on to or a warning to obey? And then wanting, as we seek to understand it ourselves and as we seek to teach it to others, wanting others to feel the way that that text is meant to make us feel.